Welcome to the Leadership Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Jono White. I'm the founder and principal consultant of Clarity. We are an Australian-based consultancy that works with leaders around the world, and our passion is to invest in people to become everything they're meant to be in order to fill the world with healthy organizations that people love to work for and customers line up to buy from. The goal of this podcast is to invest in you and your leadership. If you're just joining us for the first time, then feel free to check out consultclarity.org. That's our website, consultclarity.org. We have so many free resources on there, the most popular being our 7 Questions on Leadership series. We've had more than 1,500 leaders from around the world in all different sectors give their in-depth answers on leadership, what books they love, what they found most challenging, the most meaningful stories, how they structure their time through the day. That's free, so go and check it out. And we'd love to interview you about your leadership. I believe you have advice from your experience, your context, and your life so far that is important and can help other leaders. It's also a great way to give back. It's free to get involved, and you can do so by going to consultclarity.org/7-questions-interest, or just Google consultclarity.org 7 questions interest and fill out the form that pops up. We have a free resource for you on our website. It's called Leadership Survival Guide. It's a 57-page ebook. It has interviews with 10 world-class leaders, and you can go to consultclarity.org. It's right at the top, and get that today. We also have a daily email that we send out to over 15,000 leaders, and that email contains the highlights, our best content from our podcasts, our blog, my book, the books that we're loving that are out there about leadership. It's also the best way to get access to our masterclasses and workshops before anyone else. And there's also exclusive and limited special options just for subscribers. And you can subscribe by going to consultclarity.org/subscribe. Now, my gift to you is to work incredibly hard to provide the best leadership content I can to invest in you and your leadership. So if you're finding our content helpful, if you find this podcast helpful, then your gift to me could be this. If you do find it helpful, then write a review or rate our content and make sure you subscribe or follow. I can't emphasize enough how helpful that is. It really does help us to get the word out there so we can invest in more leaders to become everything they're meant to be. It also means a lot to me personally when people like you and people in our community share our content on social media. So if you do that, then please do look for me, Jono White, to tag me, and look to tag Clarity on whatever platform you're on. And our team, including me, I'm always looking to see when people have mentioned us so that I can engage with you. And also we look at sharing content. So if you write something about something we've done, there's also a good chance we'll share that with our followers. So if you could do that, that is a massive, massive help as we try to invest in as many leaders as we can around the world. Last of all, you can check out my book about how to deal with difficult people even if you hate conflict. It's called Step Up or Step Out. It's available on Amazon. You can just look up Step Up or Step Out Jono White, or you can go to store.consultclarity.org/book and check it out there. I have coached leader after leader after leader, and in more than 50% of the sessions, this topic comes up. How do I deal with this person? I'm finding it really difficult, and I just want to find a way that doesn't blow up to just to have a difficult conversation, to lead them better. How do I do that? There's a 3-step process that I outline in this book that I believe can help you. Okay, let's get into today's episode of the Leadership Conversations podcast. Enjoy. Welcome to another episode of the Leadership Conversations podcast. Today's guest is Anthony Taylor. Anthony is managing partner of SME Strategy. I've been looking forward to this conversation. I love strategy, and I'm guessing Anthony does too, based on SME Strategy. Now, it's so important. I think we're all going to learn a lot from this conversation. Anthony, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Jono. Happy to be here and excited to chat with you and your people.
So first of all, can you tell our listeners a little bit about what you do as managing partner at SME Strategy and what you do across the board at SME Strategy?
Yeah. So what we do, we help leadership teams do two things fundamentally. One of them is get aligned as a group and as an organization as to where they want to go. So we call that like a one destination. So we help teams escape the multiple destination trap and move them towards one destination. And then we support them in implementing their plan to get there. And we do that through leadership training, through accountability, through individual coaching. And it's a really cool experience seeing a company kind of moving in a bunch of directions to moving in one direction and then really working together to be high performing and accomplishing their goals. So it's a fun job, and I don't even consider it work. I take that back. Sometimes it feels like work.
No, I love it. I love what you do. I think it's so important. Tell us about Anthony. Tell us about your story as you look back, even as far as childhood. What are some of those moments along the way that really shaped you becoming the person and the leader you are today?
Well, so I started off when I was a young lad. I had my first kind of business. I delivered newspapers at 9 years old, and I sold lemonade at like the bus stop to try to make money. So I was always very entrepreneurial. And then I had my first job at 14. And I said, hey, what's the next job that'll pay me the most money? And I said, oh, I'll become a bartender. And then that was kind of a 10-year career in waitering. And why I reference that is it really helped me communicate with people. My entire job was talking to people, talking and listening to people. And through that time, I was volunteering with a couple nonprofits just to support them. And at the same time, kind of starting one of many businesses where I was kind of coaching entrepreneurs. I had a couple businesses at the same time. I ran 2 coffee shops, had an ESL school. I put on rock concerts. I had a couple online startups, serial entrepreneur life. And through that nonprofit work, I found I was invited to a strategic planning retreat that I found super impactful for the organizations that I was working with. And I said, hey, I could do that. And then really, my next career shift that was even post bartending was said, hey, I'll be a consultant because those guys do okay. And really just in true strategic planning fashion, manifested and created the kind of career and life that I want today. And I'm married very happily, and we are expecting our first child in August. So that's pretty exciting too.
That's awesome. My wife, Liz, and we're expecting our first child in April. So there you
Amazing.
go. Yeah,
Awesome.
same cohort. There you go. Love it. So what did you learn from lemonade stalls and paper run? Like, I love that. As a 9-year-old, you were doing that. But do you remember any moments? It doesn't have to be during doing those jobs, but when you were younger, do you have any big aha moments of like, oh, maybe everyone's not like me when it comes to this real passion to start things and make money and entrepreneurship? Was there any moment like that in your younger years where you looked around and went, oh, maybe this isn't normal. Maybe this is something unique to me?
Well, I definitely knew that I was abnormal from a young age, but the inflection point of entrepreneurship or not is, one of my best friends, Tyrell, he's a teacher. And we've had conversations at length about, hey, risk profiles for individual people are different, and that's totally okay. So he doesn't have the risk profile, has no desire to do it. I took a lot of flack for being an entrepreneur when I was young. People thought it was stupid. They made fun of me. I got teased so much because instead of, going out to a party, I had an Amway business at a time. But I always knew that I wanted to, create my future. And, now in dad life, soon to be dad life, the reason I wanted to be an entrepreneur was so I could have control of time and spend it with my future family. So I was just really focused even at a young age on really what I wanted. That was control of my life and to be able to, work with or do stuff for my family. But I just liked it. I liked doing that stuff. It was fun. And that's kind of why I say there's a great quote that I live my life by, which is, it basically says, the man either working or not working, nobody can tell what he's doing. And I kind of really try to take that to heart. And it escapes me now because it's late in the day, but it's a quote by James Michener. Yeah, I'll get you later on that one. But I just like doing entrepreneur stuff, and it doesn't even feel like being different. It's just what I'm here to do in the world.
Yeah, I really resonate with that. It's funny. I've had people say to me, "Oh, wow, I really admire that you started your own business, Clarity. How do you do it?" And I always want to say, I don't always say this, but I always want to say, it's the question for me would be, how could I not do it? Like it's so ingrained in me, and it feels so natural. And I mean, it's not that it's always easy, and it's not that I always get it right, but definitely the idea of running my own business and starting my own thing has just always been in me, and it feels very natural for me to be doing it, so much so that I do think, well, the real question would be, how could I not do it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely. They say, well, statistically, any entrepreneur, as you sure have heard, is kind of insane because there's a great likelihood of failure, greater than average. And so, and then there's also the kind of adage that you work 16 hours for yourself, so you don't have to work 8 hours for someone else. And as an alternative, that's just what we choose. By the way, it's the master of the art of living, which is the quote. I just couldn't think of it at the time. So.
Master of the art of living. Yeah. So wonderful idea. I love that idea. And I certainly have talked a lot about that on this podcast, that I think the more I see it in action when I chat to people who love what they do, the more I do believe that, yeah, you want to find work that you love so much that, yes, sometimes it's difficult, but there's a real life to the work you do. That means this idea of work-life integration is definitely something that I'm probably leaning towards more than work-life balance. You want to find work that integrates into your life because you love it so much that why would you ever want to keep them separate? They're all in one, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think the key part I wrote a book on entrepreneurship, and I talk a lot about entrepreneurship, and I'm in the life of entrepreneurship, but those levels, right, where, you work really hard and you got a high paying job, and then you've got a high paying job with other people working for you. And then you like build the business where you are kind of like separate from your company in a way. And then you really have something that's powerful and scalable. So all of those stages, and different people have different goals from their businesses. Not everybody wants to build a 10 or 100 million or $1 billion business and take over the world. Some people just want to sell flowers and be really happy. And I think that there's what's cool about the internet and the world right now is it's really democratized the ability to start a business and take control of your finances, especially through the past 2 years. People have said, hey, like the word like side hustle, it's not as kind of nerdy cool as it was before. I don't think it was ever really cool, but people are just like, hey, I'm just trying to make extra money and do something I can. One of my cousins is selling cookies. It's not that she's like, hey, I want to grow this big business. It's something she likes doing and she wants to make some money, and, kudos to her, because it's awesome. And following your passion and doing what brings you creativity, get paid for it.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's wonderful to be alive during this time, because we forget, or I do anyway, I definitely forget and take for granted that even what we're doing right now simply was not possible. The barrier to entry to do to have a quality recording between you with where you're based on the other side of the world, to me, not that long ago was literally impossible, or would have been incredibly expensive to do. And the barrier to entry now is so low. And I think it's so exciting. And I definitely forget. I don't think about that often. I just you just sort of, oh, wow, okay, anyone can work from anywhere and connect to anywhere. Great. Yeah. No, but that's so cool. That was completely impossible not long ago.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I know it's a very fun time, but with great power comes great responsibility, Charles.
Yeah, I agree. So you have to tell me, those years as a bartender, organizing rock concerts, all those different roles, the entrepreneur life, when you were doing those things, are there any stories from that season that really, where you watched another leader, a mentor from one of those roles really do an amazing thing, where you made a massive mistake that you think, wow, that really shaped what I now tell others not to do? I know that's something that I've done a lot in my career, has made big mistakes, and now they're some of the areas I'm most passionate about. Like any stories from that particular season of your life?
Oh man, well, my first book was literally Entrepreneurship Lessons I Learned the Hard Way, so you don't have to. Is the name of the book.
So good.
Called I Wish I Knew. So I've we'd be here for more than a long time if we talked about those, but I think the biggest one for any entrepreneur, and it's like really product market fit. So since we're talking about new entrepreneurs, is building stuff that people don't want. I did that way too many times to count, because it was I just like doing it, but man, how many times I've spent money, time, and energy into stuff that wasn't something that the market wanted, but again, I did it for fun. And the other thing that really drove me to the work I do now is taking on too many things. So entrepreneurs have kind of shiny object syndrome, and we're trying to do a bunch of stuff all over the place. And sometimes that's really good because that frees our creativity. And sometimes it means that you have a bunch of half-finished projects. And so, what we do with leadership teams now is really help them focus at scale so they can maximize their resources, maximize their impact, and help them get that clarity. But everything that I've brought me to here has been a culmination of 38 years of mistakes.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you for sharing that. And I hope that people listening are finding that encouraging, particularly for young leaders it's easy to hear people's stories, and you can be like, you can really pick and choose, can't you, your stories if you want to. And it all sounds like you're some genius who's never put a foot wrong. And I always love hearing people say, you know what, I could keep you here so long telling you the mistakes I've made along the way, but that's how I learned. For leaders who are listening and are going, yes, Anthony has a point about those two things you just mentioned, about really narrowing down and focusing on one direction rather than multiple directions. And I want to ask you in a moment about how to know if you're crafting products and services that no one wants, and what you learned about that, because I think that's actually that's prevalent in small and large companies. I think it's a big issue. I talk about it a lot on the podcast. Actually, I've been surprised how often it comes up. Let's start with the second one though. Leaders who are listening and going, help, how do I know if I'm pushing in too many directions? I know it sounds like a silly question, but for someone listening as a starting point, what would you say to them if they were coming to you and going, help, how do I know if I'm going in one direction or not?
Well, they probably know that they already have too many things to do. If I say, hey, does your to-do list have 1 million items on it? It's like probably a pretty good indication. But we really coined it like the multiple destination trap. And the problem with the multiple destination trap, as we named it, is that it's actually very sneaky and you don't realize it's there. So the question we ask teams specifically, and if I said, let's say, if you were 100% successful 3 years from today, okay, if you were 100% successful 3 years from today, how would you know? And if everybody on your leadership team has a different answer, you're all going to different places.
That's so good. If you were 100% successful in 3 years from now, how would you know? Whoa, that's a great question.
It's I find it so powerful because people have no idea. Sometimes they don't even know. And they say, well, then how the hell are you ever going to get there if you don't know where you're going? But what I find is most people live in this zone of implied. It's implied that we're going the same place. Well, we talked about this conversation, I'm pretty sure we're doing that, but it's the doubt, the uncertainty, the lack of clarity that causes people to be unsure of doing the right things. So they spread their resources in a whole bunch of different areas because they don't know where they're going. So you need to figure out where you're going, and then don't do stuff that isn't going to get you to where you want to go. It's obvious, but if you don't know where you're going, you don't have that kind of decision criteria as to what not to do.
Any stories that come to mind, and maybe you need to change some of the details if they're from clients, change location, name, and etc. But or maybe they've given you approval to use them. Any stories that come to mind of teams that were going, had really bought into the multiple destination idea, and it was a real breakthrough for them to sort of solidify one destination together?
Honestly, Chano, every single one, because I mean, that's the work that we do. Every single person comes to us because they're moving in different directions and they need to get alignment. And sometimes they're actually aligned, but they think they aren't. And sometimes they think they are, but they aren't. And so it's moving from implied to what we call explicit, to say, hey, this is what success looks like for 3 years from now. And it's not necessarily getting agreement for everybody, but getting alignment on it, and then figuring out, what do we need to do? So it's, for us as facilitators, that's what we do day in and day out. And every single organization has the problem fundamentally. And so that's why we're going to be in business for a very long time.
Yeah, I think what you do is so important. For those listening who really want to invest in this sort of thing, one of the questions that's popping up in my head is, what does it look like to have explicit communication around the one destination? Like, say you help an organization articulate that. Have you found, does it matter what that ends up looking like? Is it on one page? Is it a document? Does that not really matter as much as, like, what does it look like when you get there in terms of clarifying it, not getting to the destination, but nailing the explicit communication of where you're going?
Yeah, I mean, the method and the medium for communicating it, some people will have it manifested in terms of, stuffed animals, and some people will put it on a one-pager, and some people will have it in a PDF, and some people will have it in a PowerPoint, and some people will make a video about it. That's just the outcome. But, the example I use all the time when we talk about SMART goals and performance and that kind of stuff, I say, well, if I say you wanted to lose weight, now, does that mean you want to lose an ounce or 40 pounds or however many stones, depending on where you are in the world? Well, the activities that are going to be required are very different if you want to lose 1 ounce or 40 pounds. And then if you want to lose that 40 pounds, is that in 2 weeks, or is that over the next 10 years? And so it seems obvious when you say, I want to lose weight, but by how much, to what extent, by what date, can create millions of different things. So if I say, let's grow our business, does that mean we want to grow it to 10 million, to 100 million, to a billion? Does that mean, are we going to grow it in certain markets? Does it mean that we're going to be a product business? Does that mean we're going to be a service business? Let alone what are we going to do to get there? So there's just so many different options that people could take. And so, it's just really getting clear on, if we're 100% successful, how will we know? And then many of our clients look back and they say, oh my gosh, we actually accomplished that well ahead of time because it was so specifically defined that they could know if they hit it. Where a lot of organizations don't do well is that they have these conceptual, open to interpretation, too aspirational visions that are either too far away or unattainable because they're so vague. So that's our kind of antidote to that.
Do you find that people struggle to nail down a buy, when, and a how much when it comes to the one destination? Do you find it's a big challenge to get people to really decide together, or like you said, not necessarily all to agree, but to get aligned about what that is?
Yes and no. Depending on where you sit, you're going to have a greater perception of understanding of parts of it. So if you're a senior leader, if you're a CEO, if you're very experienced with that kind of thing, it might come very naturally. Some people might not have the experience of specificity. The problem with specificity is when you actually say, I will do this by this date, it puts your butt on the line. And most people are very uncomfortable with that. They don't want to be wrong. and they're only wrong to their self. They're not wrong to the world per se, but some people have a really hard time with that. But the way I kind of think about it is from a leadership team perspective. Let's say you got a leadership team of 8 people. You're just putting everybody in a room to have a conversation, and everybody brings a different perspective. So it's like a puzzle piece, and you need all of those pieces to make the full picture. So all we're doing is combining all of that to say, hey, where is the alignment between this group? What does that complete picture look like? And if you think of like a blueprint or, the picture on the front of a puzzle, that's really what we're building. So once we have the picture, then we can figure out where the pieces go instead of trying to figure out where the pieces go with no picture.
Yeah, absolutely. And are you a believer in, like, how do you recommend, what's your sort of thought on best practice to break down the one destination into, like, you've got the 4 disciplines of execution sort of framework where you've got a wildly important goal and then lag indicators, lead indicators, there's SMART goals, all those different things. Do you have a preference or a recommendation for what you've seen work best in terms of how to break it down and start, attacking it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, all of the methodologies out there for strategic planning, strategic execution are all very, very good. And the best one is the one that you do. And so I'd rather somebody do something that works for them and, kind of process agnostic. That said, we have our own process and it follows 5 steps that is inspired by all of the kind of best methodologies. And it's basically, where are we now, which has a series of sub conversations. Where are we going, which has its own series of sub conversations. What's going to get in the way? What do we need to prioritize and focus on to get there? And then how are we going to implement it? And so, we have this kind of standard vision, mission, values, things, especially for our leaders that might not be so familiar with this or are looking for a new methodology. But we break it down to make it really kind of, and I'll say this in the most loving way, idiot proof. Like you don't need to have an MBA to be able to do strategy or think strategically. You actually, 2 smart people make it more complicated. You just need to be really clear about those 5 things and, you can rock and roll.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think you hit the nail on the head. I want to ask you about the other thing that you said first before you talked about the multiple destinations. You talked about the importance of what you learned about not creating products that nobody needs or nobody wants. What would you say? Once again, I'm interested to know. A listener might be wondering, thinking, is what I do, have I really nailed making sure that I've built a product or a service our company has that people really want? What do you see? Like, what would you say to a leader who sits down with you and says, Anthony, how do I know if I've really nailed that? I mean, it's probably simple, like everything you're talking about is really simple, and I love that. What would be your response to that?
Well, my super simple and blunt way is, are people giving you money for it? Because if they're not giving you money for it, then you don't have product market fit. I find most established organizations go through iterations and they have some idea and understanding, and they typically innovate from an explicit need that's been stated in the marketplace versus entrepreneurs, startups, new businesses who have a concept. Even myself, so with the case of the strategy business, is I had to prove that people actually wanted. I knew there was a market for it, but if you think of like the product, price, place, promotion kind of equation, the first kind of half of the business, like 5-6 years, was just proving that people wanted to buy what I was selling. And from me specifically, I knew people could do strategic planning, but I didn't know they would buy it from me. Whereas I've had other stuff that I'm like, hey, here's like a nightlife website that's half in Japanese and half in English, and it's called Happening, which is a pun for anybody who speaks Japanese. But like, it was like a great idea, but nobody was willing to pay for the value. So I'm a big fan of the value proposition canvas, big fan of the business model canvas, and I'm a big fan of making sure that somebody will pay you any sum of money for your thing and actually like make that transaction. One example of that, Google some years ago. I think they were installing fiber internet into the Bay. And they said, well, we think people want this. This is Google, but before Google was as famous as it is. And they said, okay, we're thinking of doing this. And we said, great. And he's like, but if we want to do this, like pay us $20 so you can be on the list. And that was their test. They didn't have anything to offer, but they were saying, hey, pay us $20 and we'll put you on the list. They paid the $20. And for them, that was great. We have enough market demand for this that it makes sense to move it forward because people have actually paid, and not of course we'll pay you in the future. That's not good enough. You need to make sure that like you get the cash in your hand, and it'll save you tons of grief. And that's kind of, what I try to help people do.
I agree. I love that idea that only one opinion matters. And I struggle with this myself. And I see so many people struggle with this. They say, what do you think? Is this good? What do you think of my sales strategy, my marketing strategy? It's like, you know what? Your opinion doesn't matter. No offense. My opinion doesn't matter. It's the market. If the market will give you money, then the answer is yes. Like the answer is it works. And if the market won't, the answer is no. And it's not working. And there's something about it that's not meeting the market. For those who are wanting to say, start a side hustle, they're a manager, they've done, really well, but they're sort of wanting to start their own thing, or they're an entrepreneur and they're just at the start of an idea. What would you say to someone who doesn't have the capital and resources to really run a significant sort of test? Well, what are some thoughts on how you can find out whether the market is willing to pay when you're just starting out?
I mean, you can do surveys. Surveys is a way to do it. But people do pre-sales, like a lot of pre-sales go really well, that you can say, hey, like lock your price in. I see that with a lot of like product businesses, like e-products and stuff like that. Say, hey, I've got this idea to like launch a thing, like gauge the list, give people a really kick-ass deal to be the first ones, and that'll be really a good indicator of a product launch. Or you launch and you say, hey, it's open for a fixed amount of time and see how it goes. And the tricky part is that sometimes you don't know which of the things is wrong. You could have a really great product, but your promotion is bad. You could have great promotion, but your price is too expensive or not expensive enough, which is a sick thing to think about. And then, maybe it's just not in the right place, or maybe it's not getting to the right people. Like Slack started off as an in-game messenger. Like, so they had to pivot. Now they originally were like, hey, let's do this thing. We have this great idea. That failed. But out of that came this just amazing product. So if you're determined enough, I think anything is sellable. I think especially for entrepreneurs, new entrepreneurs, there's this kind of balance between how long it takes you to get product market fit and how much money you can keep spending to prove that you're right.
Yeah, I agree. I love the book Blue Ocean Strategy. It's one of my favorite books, and one of the things that's really helped me think outside the box that I encourage people to do is to we all, that like traditionally, even sort of larger companies, it's easy to ask our customers, and it's easy to look at our competitors, right? It's like, what do our customers want? Let's ask them. What are our competitors doing? Let's watch. Let's see what they're doing. And one of the ideas that I love most from that book is that some of the best insights and the true blue oceans that have been developed have come from non-customers. Who are the people who won't use our industry? Like Square. I think they talk about Square in the one of the really updated versions of that book, and they talk about how Square really hit a non-customer group. Like they didn't say, okay, who's using credit cards and how can we make it easier for them? I mean, that is now part of their group, but really who they targeted was who can't use credit cards, who actually, not credit cards, who can't use FPOS, who can't have an FPOS machine because it's too much of a hassle, it's too expensive. And they hit that group. It's like the group that are non-customers. And I love the idea to really get us thinking creatively, to say, don't just look at your competitors, look at alternative industries. As a consultant, I can look at, and I've been trying to do this for myself. It's always hard to consult to yourself, but I try to do this with myself and apply this to clarity. It's like, okay, I could look at other thought leaders, other consultants, And that's one thing. But what are other industries doing? How are other industries packaging up their, services, their products? How are they productizing? Like not just in consulting, but completely different industries. And like you mentioned there, taking something from gaming, but then pivoting and going across into a different industry. But I think when you're trying to create, that's what I love about that idea, is actually when you're at the point where you're looking at your product or service and scratching your head and going, how do I make sure I'm not just making something that I think is cool, and I'm actually making something that is truly a value innovation, as they talk about it in that book?
Yeah, I think most people, they sell something that, like you said, that think it is cool. But if we use that square example, they solve the pain. And that's the only thing that motivates people. It's pain and pleasure. And I would bet, and I think that most people would agree, that pleasure is more powerful than pain, or sorry, the other nice way around. Pain is more powerful than pleasure. So figure out what the biggest pains of the people that you know the best are and focus on solving those. For me, I don't know anything about fashion, so I'm not going to try to solve something about fashion because I'm just not equipped to do that. I don't get it. But I do get business people, and I do get sports, and I do get entrepreneurs, and get all that stuff. So I'm uniquely positioned, and you as a listener are uniquely positioned to solve some problem with your skills, experience, background, and perspective. But people don't pay for something that's kind of incrementally better. They will pay for something that solves a problem, and they'll pay for it quickly. So that would be the number one thing. If they don't have a problem, then and I say this all the time, the benefit of the future needs to be greater than the pain of change. And part of that pain of change is, spending the money for whatever it is. So if the benefit's not big enough, if the pain isn't big enough, then it probably isn't going to warrant an exchange of any significance.
Do you have any advice around how to work out what is causing pain?
I really like the value proposition canvas, as I said before, but it's like a deep understanding to whoever you're talking to. Because like, Jono, yours pain might be different than your wife's pain, than, somebody else in your family, than your coworker. And so really recognizing that pain is both situational, pain and pleasure, and needs are also situational. And so really making sure that you have that right timing. For us, when we started our business, we were really selling 2-day strategy offsites. We still do. And we say, well, great. Well, like most people are doing that. And so what are the biggest pains that they have around X instance? And then so we created marketing collateral to address that. So when people went and Googled the pain that they had, they said, oh, these guys are positioned to solve our pain. And then they became solution aware. So again, I could talk about so many things, but it's really just understanding your customer and kind of like positioning yourself in front of them with the solution. It's going to rain, give them an umbrella. They're at a sports game and they're thirsty, make sure they can get a beer. They're at a restaurant, well, make sure you present them with the best options that are going to help them have the best meal, which includes good wine, good food, good desserts. Don't make it hard for the customer, make it easy for them.
Are you a believer in really narrowing down, exactly who your customer is? Do you find you're having to help your clients stop trying to market to everyone and really nail down exactly who they want to reach? Is that something that comes up a lot for you, or do you not really think it matters as much?
I believe it absolutely matters. We look at it as one of those kind of strategic inflection questions, and we address it under mission and purpose. So why does our organization exist? What do we do, and what do we provide, and who do we provide it for, so that we focus our 70% of our energy serving that customer and 30% potentially serving somebody else. But it's one of those strategic decisions. If we try to serve all markets, we're not going to do it successfully. And so then you don't really have a strategy. You're just, spreading your resources again.
Yeah, that's great. That's great, Anthony. For those who haven't done that well, I've been working with some people recently who really needed to do that process, and we've been working through that together. So for those who are going, yeah, actually, maybe I have been trying to serve everyone, is there anything? I don't want to ask you to give away. Obviously, if people really want a lot of help, they can drop you a line and work with you guys. But is there any starting point you'd say to articulating who specifically you might want to work with for that 70%? Who's that one customer? Any advice?
Yeah, figure out where you want to be in 3 years, and then figure out which customer is going to get you there.
Yes, I love it. I love it when there's a good theme. I love when things come back around. And I can see why you do what you do. It's very simple, very clear. And no, that's great advice. And thank you for doing that. Well, let's jump into Leadership Express. I've got a few questions for you to finish today. Are you ready?
Awesome. Let's do it.
Okay. First of all, what's a book that you've gifted to others?
Other than my own, what's a book that I've gifted to others? The 5 a.m. Club. I really like that book. As a matter of fact, I've been getting up at 5 o'clock this week, not by design. Well, everything's by design, but it's a great book. It is pretty simple. Say, hey, wake up at 5 o'clock, you'll get more done. I found it to be true, but it's a little bit more nuanced than that, because it's about spending the time on yourself, investing in yourself in the beginning of the day, so that you can have a productive rest of the day. Great book.
Thank you. Great recommendation. Now, and just any podcasts right now that you're enjoying listening to, or right now, are there any books that you're in the middle of really loving or you've read recently?
The Strategy and Leadership podcast by SME Strategy, but that's a biased choice.
That's good.
I'm in the middle of reading Scalable Revenue, which was written by the guys that did what's that company? One of those, Salesforce. I'm enjoying that one. I'm listening to like a Tony Robbins book on tape, which is, from like 30 years ago, but it's still pretty good. So those are the two things that I'm digesting right now.
Great. Excellent. You already mentioned a couple of fantastic questions. Are there any questions you haven't mentioned that are go-to questions that you find yourself asking teams, individuals a lot, that you really love asking?
I always ask, so I got two, and they're kind of in different realms. One is when we look at goals and actions, and once they've done the strategic priorities, I say, would you bet? Would you take a bet? Like, what's this worth to you that we get this done? And would you bet that you have enough action in terms of quality and quantity to accomplish it? And if you don't, then you're not going to win the bet. And there's probably, a sizable outcome for you to actually make sure that's done. So make sure you go back and say, hey, have you built a sufficient plan to accomplish the goals? The other is, I ask senior leaders, I say, how much time do you spend communicating in your work? And most senior leaders, if they're leading teams, will say something like 70 to 80%. And then I say, well, if you're trying to accomplish immediate improvement in your effectiveness, focus on how you communicate, because that's what you spend most of your time doing. And again, it goes to quality and quantity, but making sure you have the right structure for communication to keep your team moving forward. So those are the two go-tos I have that we include all the time.
I love it. They're fantastic. What's a recent leadership lesson you've learned for the first time or been reminded of?
I recorded a podcast earlier today with somebody who teaches adults, but is inspired by teaching kids and reminding people of their successes first. It's really easy to poo-poo on people and, tell them what they're not doing right. But if you want to have great performance, remind people the stuff that they are doing well, either individually or as a company, and use that as a foundation to build from as you're providing feedback and supporting their growth.
Yeah, that's great. What's a great piece of advice you've received?
What is a great piece of advice that I've received? My friend Christian from high school once told me, prepare hard, fight easy. And I've always liked that one.
That's gold. That's fantastic. Thank you. Love it. What is a commonly held belief in leadership that you passionately disagree with?
No, I'm sure there's a bunch. What is it? Passionately held. Let me think about that one.
It could be business as well, not just leadership, because I think of leadership a bit more broadly. I'm thinking of business, entrepreneurship. So yeah, maybe a commonly held belief across business for entrepreneurs, leadership that you just really disagree with.
The first thing that jumped to mind is that it's hard. It's not that it's hard. It's just a set of skills you might not have yet. And so developing those skills and doing it the right way the first time. I think that now with communication virtually and all of that stuff, not that that's bad, is that it makes it really easy to try to sneak away from the tough conversations, like going through stuff instead of around stuff in terms of communication. And so it's not hard, but if you just don't have experience with it, you just don't have experience. So you just got to build the skill set of leadership. And that's a big gap that I see, well, in the marketplace, but also with people.
Love it. It's a great thought. A movie or TV show that really impacted you?
I think my favorite movie is Bloodsport, but I don't know if that counts in the context of this. But
no, that's great, because I always love saying some of the recommendations we've had include Golden Girls, Ally McBeal, Seinfeld. So Bloodsport, that fits.
Perfect.
It's my chance to really just get some great movie and TV show recommendations. No, I enjoy asking that because as leaders, yeah, we have really serious conversations about strategy and about all these things, but leadership, and it's always just about people. And so sometimes there's a really deep leadership principle. Someone recently just mentioned Moneyball as a great movie about which I was like, oh, that's so true. I've never thought about that. It's a great movie about disruption and like everything we talked about in terms of how do you like sort of disrupting an industry and bringing insights from an alternative industry into and shaking things up. And I was like, oh, I've never looked at Moneyball, with Brad Pitt about baseball. I've never thought of it that way. So yeah. And then you've got recommendations like Seinfeld, which I spent like 10 minutes chatting about with one guest because I'm a massive Seinfeld fan. So brilliant. Great answer. Bloodsport. Love it. Okay.
I just on Moneyball, I think that there's a great leadership lesson from Moneyball about delivering tough communication. And I think if people embrace that, I think that they would be better communicators by just giving it straight when you need to. But I'll let you all watch the movie.
Absolutely. You reminded me of another one, which I'll throw in there. And if you think of another favorite movie or TV show, go for it, because this is just one of my favorite parts of the podcast to recommend some really random things. But I love sport, and I have to be careful. I try not to just talk about sport too much in the podcast, because I know, got to understand my customer, the listeners, they're not all sport fanatics. But if you are, there's a great series that follows coaches through a whole season. I can't remember off the top of my head what it's called, but Pep Guardiola is the coach of Manchester City in the UK, which is obviously they play football or soccer. And there's a great moment in the season where they follow him, and it's where one of the all-time great player misses the most obvious, easy open goal ever, and it really cost the team. And I was watching fascinated, and it's a great lesson because he does what I love from that book, Radical Candor, and I've talked about it quite a lot, which is that when caring meets challenging, like when we can care and challenge for our people, it's that combination. That's great leadership. And that's what Pep Guardiola does with Raheem Sterling, the player who missed this obvious goal. He sort of comforts him. He's there with him, being like, he's got his back. And then you're there. It's crazy. You're there when he's having this conversation where he's like, hey, I'm going to, I'm not going to start you for the next game because you just, we have to be scoring those goals. And I just was like, oh, like it was brutal. But this is the team that's arguably the top performing soccer team in the world right now. And it was a great lesson in how to have your people's back, but at the same time, he made a really hard call, but he said it to his face. He said it in front of the documentary camera too. And I mean, the guy was devastated, Raheem Sterling, but you could just see that he had the respect. He respected his coach. even if he disagreed, he knew that he cared about him and he told him straight. And yeah, it was just one of those moments where I was just watching, almost holding my breath, because it was such a tough conversation, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that's why they get paid the big bucks and have to make those big decisions. And even as a CEO and leader, I find there's a couple things. One is if you're not working on the highest value activities, and two, if you're not having those tough conversations, you're actually hurting your business or organization more than you're helping it. And you're kind of doing the thing that you're trying to avoid. And so when you realize that there's something so much bigger at stake than just your discomfort, it makes it a lot easier to kind of stand in that and say, if I don't do this, everybody else is going to suffer. So, getting that kind of yourself, taking yourself out of the situation and thinking about the group gives me personally a more solid footing to make tough decisions and have tough conversations.
I think you said that really well. In fact, I think you have a really great way of unpacking things. I can see why you've written some books and do what you do, Anthony. That was, and the podcast, it's you articulate that really well. That was great. One last question. Oh, did you have any other movies or TV shows that jumped in your head while I was talking about Pep Guardiola?
No, not right now.
Okay, that's right. Thought I'd check. If you could only give one piece of leadership advice to a young leader, what would you say?
If I could only give one piece of leadership advice to a young leader, don't try to look good.
That's fantastic. Don't try to look good. Wish I'd known that when I was younger. That's so true.
You had mentioned, I think you had mentioned, like when you say, you avoid, well, if you avoid tough stuff, if you avoid things because you're trying to make yourself look good, just like do the right thing and follow your gut, and everything will become a lot easier when you stop, thinking about the critics and the doubters and just, work with people. You'll be way more successful because you don't worry about what it looks like.
That's such good advice. That's really good advice. And it reminds me, one of my favorite quotes that I've heard that someone's mentioned in the podcast. I don't think they came up with it, but they mentioned it. And it's this idea, which I think young leaders really need to hear. It's sort of in the same vein of what you just said is there's no such thing as winning and losing. There's only winning and learning. And I think that's so true. If you're a young leader, forget about how you look, forget about even sometimes whether, let go of perfect, that's for sure. But even just maybe relax a bit about screwing up and about whether you nail everything perfectly, and just jump in and give things a red hot go, and know that even if it doesn't work, particularly for young leaders, you're going to learn heaps. And if you can be curious and learn and open and not worry about looking good, then even if you don't win in that one battle or that one game, you don't lose, you learn. And that's definitely where a lot of my key learnings came from, which in hindsight, I was so scared and horrified at the idea of failing. And now it was actually some of those failures that really led to me being so passionate about what I'm doing now.
Awesome. I love it. I mean, that's the best case, right? And failing is scary, right? So that's, again, it's all about
it is,
like you said, full circle. It's all goes back to the risk tolerance. So you got to be willing to fail to be able to get to that next place. Otherwise you'll just stay where you're at.
So good. Well, this has been so much fun. I'm looking at the clock, and I just want to ask you as we finish, where can people find you? They've heard, they're going, oh, I need to work with Anthony, or they just want to connect with you online, read your book, your podcast. What are the different ways people can find you, Anthony?
Yeah, thanks for asking, Jono. And it's been a real pleasure chatting with you today. People can find me, Anthony C as in cat, Taylor. That's not my middle name. Anthony C Taylor on most internet things. SME, like Sam Monkey Elephant, strategy.net. You can find our company and then our strategy and leadership podcast, where we interview really smart people doing cool things on YouTube and SoundCloud and Spotify. And then YouTube, we've got, 20,000 subscribers and tons of videos on YouTube. So if you want to learn more about leadership, we give all of our stuff away for free, Jono, because we want it to be in the hands of people. And we know that they'll say, hey, we want to work with you. And I'll say, great, let's do it.
Love it. And I can just see the Google trend increasing for the search. Anthony Cat Taylor. Anthony the Cat Taylor. I swear I heard this podcast and his name was Anthony the Cat Taylor. Anthony C. Taylor. That's but Anthony Cat Taylor's got a nice ring to it, man. I know that's
Let's make it a thing. Let's start it. You heard it here first, folks.
I think
on this podcast.
customers are going to lap that up. I'm guessing that is going to meet a lot of needs.
I really hope that was a cat pun, by the way.
Oh no, it wasn't.
Okay.
It wasn't. It was a complete accidental pun, and I love puns, so I wish it had been purpose.
Okay. Well, next time I won't make a cat pun here, but that was great.
Well, I want to thank our listeners for tuning in. This has been not only fun, but also really challenging. I know a bunch of you are going to re-listen. That's one of those episodes. I think there'll be some re-listening. What did Anthony say there? Man, that hit me hard, and in the best way possible. And so don't forget, we also have the John O. White Leadership Podcast, where I give you more straight up tips on how to cast vision and build a high performance team, and the leadership question of the day, a different question every day to challenge you, put a stone in your shoe, as I often say, and make you uncomfortable so you can grow. But I want to finish today by saying a massive thank you to Anthony Taylor. I nearly said it again. Anthony, thank you so much for coming on. You are just a lot of fun to chat with. Great wisdom. You articulate things incredibly well, and just have had a ball chatting with you. And I think it'll help a lot of people. So thank you so much.
Likewise, sir. It's been my pleasure. And I did actually, just as we finish, I came up with one more quote from a TV show, Parks and Recreation. Ooh. Ron Swanson says, "Don't half-ass two things, whole-ass one thing." And I use that every single time I work with a team.
One of the great characters of recent television, Ron Swanson. Thank you. I'm so happy to end on a Parks and Recreation quote. What a wonderful way to end the episode. And if you haven't seen Parks and Recs, go and watch that as well. It's good for your leadership.
Awesome. Thank you, Jono.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Leadership Conversations podcast as much as I did. If you're joining us for the first time, don't forget to check out consultclarity.org. That's our website, consultclarity.org. We have so many free resources on there, including our 7 questions on leadership series. We've had more than 1,500 leaders from all over the world in all different roles, in different industries, answer these 7 questions on leadership, and leaders give these in-depth answers around how they spend their time, a book that's been significant for them. It's just a gold mine. It's completely free to access, so go to consultclarity.org and look for that. We'd also love to interview you about your leadership. I believe your experience, your life, your context means that you have advice on leadership that other leaders can learn from. Yes, you, if you're going, not me, well, no, I really believe you would have something to add. So if you're looking for a way to give back, it's completely free to get involved. And we would love to interview you through the 7 questions on leadership. You just go to consultclarity.org/7-questions-interest, or Google consultclarity.org 7 questions interest and fill out the form and get involved. We have a free resource on our website called the Leadership Survival Guide. It's a 57-page ebook, 10 world-class leaders giving their thoughts on leadership, and that's completely free. It's available on our homepage, consultclarity.org, right at the top, so make sure you go and get that and download it today. And we have a free daily email that you can subscribe to. We send this out to over 15,000 leaders from around the world. And it contains the highlights of content from our podcasts, our blogs, our books we're reading. It's got the best content, and it gives you exclusive, limited, early access to our masterclasses, workshops, new products, special offers. It's all for our subscribers. You can go to consultclarity.org/subscribe and join 15,000 other leaders. And you know, my gift to you is to work really hard, particularly through the Leadership Conversations podcast. I have been blown away by the quality of the leaders, and I'm learning as much as anyone in doing these interviews. So I'm having a great time. And my gift to you is to keep lining up the best leaders I can to invest in your leadership. Your gift to me, if you're finding this helpful, there is something that you could do that would help us out massively. And that is to write a review and to leave a rating for our podcast or wherever you're watching or listening to this. I can't tell you how much that helps us out. Also, subscribe or follow. It really does make a difference in helping us to help more leaders become everything they're meant to be. Another thing that means a lot to me personally is when I see our community share our content. So if you do share this or any other piece of content on social media, then thank you, and please do that. And look for me, John O. White, or Clarity, and tag us in your post. Our team is always looking for posts to engage with from our community, and there's also a chance that we'll share your content to go beyond and share it with our followers. Last of all, you can check out my book. It's called Step Up or Step Out: How to Deal with Difficult People Even If You Hate Conflict. I wrote this book because 50% of the coaching sessions I have with leaders, this topic comes up again and again and again. And it's this idea of, how do I have this difficult conversation? How do I lead this person better when I'm finding them difficult? Or in some cases, you look and you say, I think I might be leading a difficult person. They're just quite difficult to lead, or I'm finding them quite difficult to lead. So there's a 3-step process that I unpack in Step Up or Step Out. And the amazing thing, and I've literally done this myself, and I've heard it anecdotally from other leaders as I've coached them, is that if you follow this process, you will see that person step up and change their behavior or make a decision, which is to step out some of the time. 95% of the time, people will step up or step out in just 4 weeks. And I stand by that. It's you have to read the book to understand, but I really do believe in it, and I've experienced it firsthand. It works. So you can go to Amazon, look up Step Up or Step Out John O. White, or store.consultclarity.org/book. Well, thank you so much for listening. We're going to be back with a new episode next time of the Leadership Conversations podcast. And I hope today has helped you to take another step towards becoming the leader you're meant to be. See you next time.